The blood on the snow told Clara Reeves exactly how close they were getting, and the realization sent ice through her veins that had nothing to do with the brutal Nevada winter of 1883. She pressed herself deeper into the rocky outcropping, her breath coming in sharp gasps that created small clouds in the frigid air. Her fingers were numb despite the gloves she wore, and her feet felt like blocks of ice in her worn boots. The mountains outside Hawthorne rose steep and unforgiving around her, and somewhere behind her, 8 men tracked her through the snow with murder in their hearts. Clara had witnessed something she should never have seen, something that would hang every last one of them if she made it to the marshal alive. But that was a mighty big if, and she knew it. The sound of voices carried on the wind, harsh and determined. They were spreading out, forming a net she could not hope to slip through. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she looked around desperately for another hiding place, somewhere they would not think to look. The canyon walls offered precious little cover, and her tracks in the snow led right to where she crouched. She was 22 years old, and she was going to die out here in the cold, all because she had taken a shortcut through the wrong alley at the wrong time. She could not have gotten far, a voice called out closer than before. Not in this weather. Keep looking. Clara recognized that voice. It belonged to Marcus Tate, the man who had pulled the trigger on the banker 3 nights ago. The man whose face she had seen clearly in the lamplight before she ran. The man who had rallied 7 others to hunt her down before she could talk. She tried to make herself smaller, pressing against the frozen rock when she heard it. The soft crunch of boots in snow, deliberate and measured. Someone was coming from the opposite direction, from deeper in the canyon. Her eyes went wide as panic seized her. They had gotten behind her somehow. She was trapped. A figure emerged from around a bend in the rock, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. Clara's hand went to the small knife at her belt, the only weapon she had. It would not do much good, but she would not go down without a fight. The man stopped when he saw her, his hand going up in a gesture of peace. "Easy now," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the howling wind. "I am not with them." Clara stared at him, trying to decide if he was telling the truth. His face was weathered and strong, with dark stubble along his jaw and eyes that were a startling shade of green beneath the brim of his hat. He looked to be around 26 or 27, with the build of someone who made his living with his hands. A cowboy, she thought, taking in the worn denim and leather, the gun belt slung low on his hips. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice shaking from cold and fear. "Name is Flynn Easton," he said, keeping his voice low. "I have been tracking those men for 2 days now. Saw them gathering in town, all armed and looking mean. Figured they were up to no good, so I followed." His eyes moved past her, scanning the rocks. "How many are there?" "8, Clara said. 8 men hunting me." Flynn's jaw tightened and something flickered in his green eyes. Not fear, but calculation. He looked back at her, taking in her frozen state, the desperation in her face. Then he did something that shocked her to her core. He stepped closer, positioning himself between her and the direction the voices were coming from. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. "I will handle all 8. Clara wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. 1 man against 8. It was suicide. But there was something in the way Flynn Easton stood, something in the set of his shoulders and the steadiness of his hands that made her believe he might actually have a chance. "You do not understand," she said urgently. "They are not going to stop. They saw me see them kill Harold Jenkins, the banker. They cannot let me live." Flynn nodded slowly, his expression hardening. "Then they are murderers as well as cowards, hunting a woman through the snow." He glanced at her again, and his voice softened just a fraction. "What is your name?" "Clara Reeves." "Well, Miss Reeves, you just stay put and let me do what needs doing." The voices were getting closer. Clara could hear them calling to each other, coordinating their search. Flynn moved with surprising speed, his hand going to his gun, but he did not draw it yet. Instead, he positioned himself at a narrow point in the rocks where they would have to come at him single file or in pairs at most. "Up here," someone shouted. "I see tracks." 3 men appeared first, stumbling through the snow with their weapons drawn. They pulled up short when they saw Flynn standing there, blocking their path. Clara recognized all 3. Marcus Tate in the lead, with his cronies James Wheeler and Dutch Kerner flanking him. "Well, well," Marcus said, his lips pulling back in something that was not quite a smile. "Looks like the lady found herself a protector. You picked the wrong day to play hero, friend. Step aside and you can walk away from this." "I do not think so," Flynn said calmly. "The lady is under my protection now. You boys best turn around and head back to town." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the canyon walls. "There are 8 of us and one of you. Do the math." "I am real good at math," Flynn replied. "And the way I figure it, 8 cowards do not add up to 1 man with a righteous cause." The insult hung in the air for a moment, and Clara saw the fury flash across Marcus's face. His hand twitched toward his gun, but Flynn was faster. In a blur of movement that Clara almost could not follow, Flynn drew and fired. The shot cracked through the cold air, and Marcus's gun went flying from his hand. A neat hole drilled through the trigger guard. Marcus yelped and clutched his hand, which was bleeding but still attached. "Next one goes through flesh," Flynn said evenly. "Now I am going to say this one more time. Turn around and go home." But the other men were appearing now, drawn by the gunshot. 5 more figures emerged from various directions, all armed, all looking mean. Clara's heart sank. Flynn might be fast, but even he could not outdraw 8 men at once. "Impressive shooting," said a lean man with a scar across his cheek. Clara knew him as Robert Chase, one of the worst of the lot. "But you are surrounded now. Put down the gun and maybe we will make it quick." Flynn did not move, did not show even a flicker of fear. "Any of you boys ever been in a real gunfight?" he asked conversationally. "See, in a real fight it does not matter much how many guns there are. What matters is who is willing to die first. Because I guarantee you, even if you get me in the end, I am taking at least 4 or 5 of you with me. Maybe more if I am having a good day." His eyes swept across them, cold and measuring. "So who wants to be first? Who wants to die in the snow for Marcus Tate's mistakes?" The men shifted uneasily. Clara could see doubt creeping into their faces. They had signed on to hunt down one frightened woman, not face a gunfighter who seemed utterly unafraid of death. "He is bluffing," Marcus snarled, wrapping his bleeding hand in a handkerchief. "Take him!" But no one moved. The standoff stretched for a long moment, tension thick enough to cut. Then Flynn did something unexpected. He smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Tell you what," he said, "I am feeling generous today. You boys drop your guns in the snow and start walking back to town. I will let you live. You can explain to the marshal what you were doing out here, hunting this lady. I am sure he will be real interested to hear about it." "We are not dropping anything," Robert hissed. "You are a dead man, Cowboy." Flynn's expression went flat. So be it. What happened next was a chaos of motion and sound. Flynn moved like lightning, throwing himself to the side as he fired twice. 2 men went down, clutching wounded shoulders. Clara screamed and pressed herself against the rock as bullets flew. Flynn rolled behind a boulder, his gun barking 3 more times in rapid succession. Another man howled in pain, his leg buckling under him. The remaining men scattered, looking for cover, but Flynn had chosen his position well. The narrow canyon worked in his favor, limiting their ability to flank him. He fired again, and Dutch Kerner's hat flew off his head, a neat hole through the crown. The message was clear. Flynn could have killed him if he wanted to. Anybody else want to test me? Flynn called out, his voice hard as iron. Clara heard someone running, boots pounding through the snow, then another set of footsteps. The men were retreating, helping their wounded companions. Marcus Tate's voice rose in fury, trying to rally them, but fear had taken hold. They had expected an easy hunt, not a man who fought like the devil himself. "This is not over," Marcus shouted from somewhere out of sight. "We will find you both. I will be waiting," Flynn shouted back. He stayed in position for several more minutes, his gun ready, until the sounds of the men's retreat faded completely. Only then did he lower his weapon and turn to check on Clara. She was shaking, but not just from the cold anymore. Adrenaline and shock coursed through her system. Flynn holstered his gun and moved to her side, his expression softening with concern. "Are you hit?" he asked, his hands hovering near her shoulders as if he wanted to check but did not want to presume. "No," Clara managed. "No, I am fine. I cannot believe you just did that." "We need to move," Flynn said, scanning the canyon. "They will regroup and they might come back with more men. Can you ride?" "I do not have a horse. I have been on foot since yesterday." Flynn cursed under his breath. "My horse is about a quarter-mile back. Think you can make it that far?" Clara nodded, though her legs felt like jelly. Flynn took her arm, steadying her, and together they began making their way through the snow. The cold bit at Clara's exposed skin, and her teeth started chattering uncontrollably. Flynn noticed and shrugged out of his heavy coat, draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. "You will freeze," she objected. "I have been through worse," he said simply. "Just keep moving." They trudged through the snow in silence for several minutes. Clara's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. This stranger, this cowboy named Flynn Easton, had put his life on the line for her without hesitation. He had faced down 8 armed men and somehow managed to drive them off without killing anyone, though she suspected he could have if he chose to. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why did you help me? You do not know me." Flynn was quiet for a moment, his breath misting in the cold air. "My mother was hunted once," he said finally, his voice low, "by men who wanted to hurt her for something she witnessed. She died before anyone could help her. I was just a boy." He looked at Clara, and she saw old pain in his green eyes. "I swore I would never stand by and let that happen to another woman, not if I could do something about it." Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I am sorry about your mother." "It was a long time ago," Flynn said, though she could tell it still hurt. "But it taught me something important. Sometimes you have to stand up, even when the odds are against you. Especially then." They reached his horse, a sturdy roan gelding with intelligent eyes. Flynn helped Clara into the saddle and then swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his presence, his arms coming around her to take the reins, his body warm and solid against her back. "Where are we going?" she asked. "There is a line shack about 5 miles from here," Flynn said. "It belongs to the ranch where I work. We can hole up there for the night, let you warm up. Then tomorrow we will figure out our next move." Clara wanted to object, wanted to say they should head straight for town and the marshal, but the truth was she was exhausted and frozen to her core. A few hours of warmth and rest sounded like heaven. She nodded and let herself lean back against Flynn's chest as he urged the horse forward through the snow. The ride seemed to take forever. The wind picked up, driving snow into their faces. Flynn kept the horse at a steady pace, navigating through terrain that all looked the same to Clara's untrained eyes. She found herself growing drowsy despite the cold, lulled by the rhythm of the horse's gait, and the steady presence of the man behind her. "Stay awake," Flynn said quietly near her ear. "Just a little longer, Clara. We are almost there." The sound of her name in his voice sent a strange warmth through her. She forced her eyes open and tried to focus. True to his word, a small cabin appeared through the swirling snow about 10 minutes later. It was rough and weathered but solid, with smoke already curling from the chimney. "Someone is here?" Clara asked nervously. "Just me," Flynn said. "I've been staying here the last few days, tracking some strays. Lucky for you." He dismounted and helped her down, catching her when her frozen legs nearly gave out. His hands were strong and sure as he steadied her, and for a moment they stood close together, his eyes searching her face. "Can you walk?" "I think so." He kept a hand on her elbow as they made their way to the cabin door. Inside was blessedly warm, with a fire crackling in the small stone fireplace. The space was cramped but clean, with a narrow bed in one corner, a small table and 2 chairs, and supplies stacked neatly along one wall. Flynn guided Clara to the chair nearest the fire and immediately set about making coffee. His movements were efficient and practiced, the actions of a man used to taking care of himself. Clara watched him through heavy-lidded eyes, taking in details she had not noticed before. The way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the strength in his hands as he worked. The small scar above his left eyebrow. "Here," he said, pressing a tin cup of hot coffee into her hands. "Drink this. It will help." Clara wrapped her frozen fingers around the cup, savoring the warmth. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it tasted better than anything she had ever drunk. Flynn pulled the other chair closer and sat down, his eyes serious. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. "All of it. I need to know what we are dealing with," so Clara told him. She explained how she worked as a seamstress in Hawthorne, how she had been walking home late from a client's house 3 nights ago and had taken a shortcut through an alley. She described seeing Marcus Tate arguing with Harold Jenkins, the banker, and how the argument had turned violent. How Marcus had pulled his gun and shot the banker in cold blood while his companions watched, and how Clara had gasped, the sound giving her away, sending her running into the night with 8 men on her heels. "I hid in the church all night," she said, her voice shaking with the memory. "But they found me the next morning. I barely got away. I have been running ever since, trying to get to Virginia City where my brother lives. He is a deputy there, but they kept cutting me off, driving me up into the mountains." She looked at Flynn with haunted eyes. "If you had not found me when you did, they would have killed me, I am sure of it." Flynn's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. "Marcus Tate," he muttered. "I know him. He has been in trouble before, but nothing this bad. Murder is a hanging offense." "That is why they cannot let me live," Clara said. "I am the only witness." Flynn was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Then he looked at her, and there was something fierce and protective in his expression that made Clara's breath catch. "They will have to go through me," he said simply. "And I do not intend to make that easy." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She was so tired, so scared, and this man's kindness felt overwhelming. "You have already done so much. You could have been killed out there." "But I was not," Flynn said. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of dark hair back from her face. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. "You are safe now, Clara. I give you my word." Something passed between them in that moment, something Clara could not quite name but felt all the way to her bones. She had known this man for mere hours, but there was a connection forming, forged in fire and danger and his unwavering courage. "Why do you not get some sleep?" Flynn said, his voice soft. "You look dead on your feet. I will keep watch." "Where will you sleep?" "I will be fine in the chair. You take the bed." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a heavy blanket. She nodded and moved to the narrow bed, not even bothering to remove her boots. She pulled the rough blanket over herself and closed her eyes. The last thing she remembered was the sight of Flynn sitting by the fire, his gun resting on his lap, keeping watch over her like a guardian angel. She woke to the smell of bacon frying and weak sunlight filtering through the cabin's single window. For a moment Clara was disoriented, not sure where she was. Then memory flooded back, and she sat up quickly, looking around. Flynn was at the small stove cooking breakfast. He glanced over at her and offered a small smile. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Sore," Clara admitted, stretching her stiff muscles. "But better, thank you. Food will be ready in a minute. We need to talk about what happens next." Clara nodded and rose from the bed, moving to splash some water on her face from the basin on the table. She felt grimy and rumpled, but there was nothing to be done about it. She sat down as Flynn brought over 2 plates of bacon and beans, simple but hearty fare. "I have been thinking," Flynn said as they ate. "Those men are not going to give up. Marcus Tate has too much to lose, but we have an advantage now. They do not know where we are and they are nursing some injuries. That buys us time." "We should go to the marshal," Clara said. "Tell him what I saw," Flynn nodded slowly. "We will, but we have to be smart about it. Marcus has friends in Hawthorne. Some of them might be wearing badges. We cannot just walk in there blind." Clara's heart sank. She had not thought of that. "So what do we do?" "We ride to Virginia City, to your brother," Flynn said. "He is a deputy, you said. He can help us figure out who to trust. And once you are somewhere safe with lawmen we know are honest, then we can bring charges against Marcus and his gang." It made sense, but Clara hated the idea of running farther. "How long will it take to get to Virginia City?" 2 days, maybe 3 depending on the weather," Flynn said. "The snow is going to slow us down, but it will slow them down too." He looked at her seriously. "I will not lie to you, Clara. It is going to be a hard ride, and there is a chance they will pick up our trail. But I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." Clara believed him. She did not understand why, did not understand how she could trust this stranger so completely, but she did. "When do we leave?" "As soon as you are ready. I will pack supplies while you finish eating." They were on the trail within the hour. Flynn had bundled Clara in every spare piece of clothing he could find, making sure she was as protected from the cold as possible. They shared the horse again, Clara sitting in front with Flynn's arms around her, guiding the animal through the snow-covered landscape. The day was clearer than the one before, with weak sunshine breaking through the clouds. It made the snow sparkle like diamonds, beautiful and treacherous. Flynn kept them moving at a steady pace, avoiding main trails and sticking to rougher terrain where their tracks would be harder to follow. "Tell me about your brother," Flynn said after they had been riding for a while. "What is his name?" "Thomas," Clara said. "Thomas Reeves. He is 5 years older than me. He left Hawthorne about 3 years ago to take the deputy position in Virginia City. He has been trying to get me to join him there, but I was stubborn. I liked my life in Hawthorne. I had my work, my friends." Her voice turned bitter. "A lot of good that did me." "You could not have known what would happen," Flynn said gently. "Sometimes bad things just happen, no matter how careful we are." "What about you?" Clara asked, wanting to shift the focus away from her own troubles. "Do you have family?" Flynn was quiet for a moment. "Not much," he said finally. "My mother died when I was 12, like I said. My father passed a few years later. No siblings. I have been on my own since I was 16. That must have been hard." "It was," Flynn admitted. "But it also made me strong, taught me to rely on myself to fight for what matters." She felt him shift slightly behind her. "I have been working as a ranch hand for the last few years. The Lazy J Ranch, about 10 miles outside Hawthorne. It is good work, honest work. The owner, Jack Montgomery, he is a fair man. Gave me a chance when a lot of folks would not have." Clara heard the respect in his voice and smiled. "He sounds like a good person." "He is. And he has a daughter about your age, Charlotte. She is fierce as they come, runs the ranch books, and does not take grief from anyone." There was fondness in Flynn's voice, but Clara noted it was the fondness of a brother for a sister, not anything romantic. The realization made something warm bloom in her chest. They rode on, talking in fits and starts. Clara found herself telling Flynn about her work as a seamstress, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with her own hands. Flynn told her about life on the ranch, about breaking horses and mending fences and sleeping under the stars. Their conversation was easy, natural, as if they had known each other for years instead of hours. As the day wore on, the temperature dropped again. Flynn stopped periodically to let the horse rest and to check their surroundings. Each time, his eyes scanned the horizon with the careful attention of a man expecting trouble. But they saw no sign of pursuit. That night, they made camp in a small grove of trees that offered some protection from the wind. Flynn built a fire and cooked more simple food while Clara tried to make herself useful by tending to the horse. She had little experience with animals, but the roan was patient with her fumbling attempts to brush him down. "You are doing fine," Flynn said, appearing at her elbow. "He likes you." "How can you tell?" Flynn smiled, and Clara was struck by how much younger it made him look. "See how he is leaning into you. That is horse talk for you are doing it right." Clara laughed, a real laugh, and felt some of the tension that had been coiled in her chest for days finally begin to loosen. Flynn reached out and took the brush from her hands, his fingers lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "You should warm up by the fire," he said, his voice a little rougher than before. "I will finish up here." Clara nodded and moved back to the fire, but she found herself watching Flynn as he worked. He moved with such confidence, such competence, and there was something deeply attractive about that. She thought about how he had stood between her and 8 armed men without flinching, how he had given her his coat even though it meant he would be cold, how he looked at her like she mattered, like her life was worth protecting. When Flynn joined her by the fire, they sat close together for warmth. The night was cold and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like chips of ice. "Beautiful," Clara murmured, looking up. "Yes," Flynn agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the sky. Their eyes met, and Clara felt her breath catch. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Flynn cleared his throat and looked away. "You should sleep," he said. "I will take first watch." "Will you wake me to take a turn?" Clara asked. "Maybe," Flynn said, but she suspected he would not. He was too protective, too determined to shoulder all the burdens himself. Clara curled up close to the fire, wrapped in blankets. She tried to sleep, but her mind would not quiet. She kept thinking about Flynn, about the way he made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before. She had known men in Hawthorne, had even been courted by a few, but none of them had made her heart race the way Flynn Easton did. She must have dozed eventually because she woke to Flynn gently shaking her shoulder. It was still dark, but the quality of the darkness had changed. Dawn was approaching. "We need to move," Flynn said quietly. "I saw a light in the distance about an hour ago." "Could be nothing, but I do not want to take chances." Clara was on her feet immediately, her heart pounding. They broke camp quickly and efficiently, and soon they were back on the trail. The horse seemed to sense the urgency and moved faster, picking its way carefully through the snow. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara saw something that made her gasp. In the distance, barely visible, were riders, at least 5 of them, moving in a line as if they were searching. "I see them," Flynn said grimly. He urged the horse into a different direction, heading for rougher terrain that would be harder to navigate but offered more cover. Hold on tight. The next few hours were a blur of motion and fear. Flynn pushed the horse hard, navigating through narrow canyons and across frozen streams. Several times Clara was sure they would be spotted, but Flynn always seemed to find another route, another hiding place. His knowledge of the land was impressive, and Clara realized he must have spent years learning every inch of this territory. By midday they had left the riders behind, but Flynn did not slow down. "They know the general direction we are heading," he said. "They will try to get ahead of us, cut us off. We need to keep moving." They stopped only briefly to rest the horse and eat some jerky and hardtack from Flynn's supplies. Clara's legs ached from riding, and her whole body felt bruised from being jostled against Flynn and the saddle. But she did not complain. She could see the strain on Flynn's face, the way his eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings. "How much farther to Virginia City?" she asked. "If we can keep this pace, we might make it by tomorrow evening," Flynn said, "but it is going to be close." They rode on as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. Clara found herself leaning more heavily against Flynn, drawing strength from his solid presence. At some point, his arm came around her waist, holding her more securely, and she did not protest. As dusk fell, Flynn found them another place to shelter, an overhang of rock that protected them from view on 3 sides. He made no fire this time, too worried about the smoke giving away their position. They ate cold food and huddled together for warmth. "I am sorry," Clara said softly. "This is all my fault. If I had just minded my own business, taken a different street." "Do not," Flynn said firmly. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "Do not apologize for existing, for being in the wrong place. Those men are the ones who chose violence. They are the ones who chose to kill, and they are the ones who will answer for it. Not you." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. She had been holding so much inside, trying to be brave, but his words broke something open. Flynn made a soft sound and pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her in a protective embrace. "It is going to be okay," he murmured into her hair. "I promise, Clara, it is going to be okay." Clara clung to him, letting herself cry for the first time since the nightmare began. Flynn just held her, one hand rubbing slow circles on her back, offering comfort without words. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back slightly, embarrassed. "I am sorry," she said, wiping at her face. "I did not mean to fall apart on you." "You have every right to fall apart," Flynn said gently. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the remaining tears. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Clara Reeves. You have been running for days, facing death at every turn, and you have not given up. That takes courage." Clara looked up at him, at the sincerity in his green eyes, and felt something shift inside her. Without thinking, acting purely on instinct, she leaned forward and kissed him. Flynn froze for just a second, clearly surprised. Then he was kissing her back, his arms tightening around her, pulling her closer. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but it quickly deepened into something more. Clara felt like she was on fire despite the cold, every nerve ending alive and singing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I do not want you to think I expect anything. I am helping you because it is the right thing to do, not because I want something in return." "I know," Clara whispered. "That is not why I kissed you." She took a shaky breath. "I kissed you because I wanted to, because you make me feel safe. Because when I look at you, I see someone good and brave and true, and I have never met anyone like you before." Flynn's eyes searched hers. I barely know you, but I feel like I have been waiting for you my whole life, he said quietly. That probably sounds crazy. No, Clara said, her heart swelling. It sounds exactly right. They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. When they settled down to sleep, Clara curled into Flynn's embrace, his arms wrapped around her. For the first time in days, she felt truly safe. They woke before dawn to the sound of voices. Flynn was alert instantly, his hand going to his gun. Clara's blood ran cold as she recognized Marcus Tate's voice, somewhere close by. They came this way, I am sure of it, Marcus was saying. Spread out, check every hiding place. Flynn and Clara looked at each other in the dim light. They were trapped. The overhang offered protection, but if the men searched thoroughly, they would be found. Flynn's jaw set with determination. He pressed his lips to Clara's forehead briefly, then moved to the edge of their shelter, peering out carefully. Clara could see 4 men from where she crouched, which meant there were likely more she could not see. Her heart hammered in her chest. They had come so far, were so close to safety, and now it might all end here. Flynn moved back to her side. Stay here, he whispered. No matter what happens, stay hidden and stay quiet. Flynn, no, Clara breathed, grabbing his arm. There are too many of them. I do not have a choice, Flynn said. His eyes were hard, resolved. I will not let them have you. Before Clara could stop him, Flynn stepped out from the shelter, his gun drawn. Looking for someone, he called out. The reaction was immediate. Men shouted, guns appeared, but Flynn was already moving, diving behind a boulder as shots rang out. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from screaming. She could hear Flynn returning fire, hear the cursing and shouting of the men. Give up the woman and we will let you live, Marcus shouted. Not a chance in hell, Flynn shot back. The gunfight continued and Clara felt helpless, useless. Then she saw movement to the side. One of the men was circling around, trying to get behind Flynn's position. Without thinking, Clara grabbed a rock and threw it as hard as she could. It struck the man in the shoulder, making him yelp in surprise and giving away his position. Flynn whirled and fired, the bullet striking close enough to send the man scrambling back for cover. But now Flynn had seen Clara, and his face went pale with fear for her. Get back, he shouted at her. That moment of distraction cost him. A bullet caught Flynn in the shoulder, spinning him around. Clara screamed, watching him fall. Terror like she had never known seized her heart. Flynn. She was moving before she could think, running to him. He was still conscious, trying to raise his gun with his good arm. Clara dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands to his bleeding shoulder. You need to run, Flynn gritted out through clenched teeth. Clara, please run. No, Clara said fiercely. I am not leaving you. The men were closing in, emboldened by Flynn's injury. Clara could see the triumph on Marcus Tate's face as he approached. She looked around desperately for Flynn's gun, but it had fallen too far away. Then she heard it, the thunder of hooves, lots of them. Riders appeared over the ridge, at least a dozen men, and at their head was a man wearing a deputy's badge. Clara's heart leaped. Thomas, she screamed. Thomas, help! Her brother pulled his horse up short, taking in the scene in an instant. His face went hard as stone. Drop your weapons, he bellowed, his voice carrying authority. Nevada Territory deputies. Drop your weapons now, the men hunting Clara froze. Marcus looked around wildly, seeing he was suddenly outnumbered and outgunned. Several of his companions immediately dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Marcus looked like he wanted to fight, but Robert Chase grabbed his arm. It is over, Marcus, Robert said. It is done. Slowly, hatred twisting his face, Marcus dropped his gun. Thomas was off his horse in an instant, running to Clara and Flynn. Clara, are you hurt? Not me, him, Clara said, tears streaming down her face. He saved me, Thomas. He kept me alive. Thomas looked at Flynn with new respect. "Can you ride?" "I can do whatever I need to do," Flynn said, though his face was pale with pain. Two of Thomas's men came to help Flynn to his feet while others rounded up Marcus and his gang. Thomas pulled Clara into a fierce hug. "When you did not arrive when you said you would, I knew something was wrong," he said. "I gathered some men and started backtracking your route." "We heard the gunshots." He held her at arm's length, looking her over. "I was so scared I would be too late." "You were right on time," Clara said, laughing and crying at once. She looked at Flynn, who was being helped onto a horse by the deputies. "Thomas, this is Flynn Easton. He protected me from those men. He stood up to all 8 of them for me." Thomas's eyebrows rose. He walked over to Flynn, extending his hand. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," he said seriously. "You kept my sister alive." Flynn shook his hand, though the movement made him wince. "She is worth protecting," he said simply, his eyes finding Clara's. The ride to Virginia City was slow and careful. A doctor met them at the edge of town, summoned ahead by one of the faster riders. Flynn's shoulder was tended to while Clara gave her statement to Thomas and the other deputies. She told them everything, sparing no detail about what she had witnessed and how Marcus Tate and his men had hunted her. "They will hang for this," Thomas said grimly. "Murder, attempted murder, conspiracy. The judge will throw every charge in the book at them." Clara nodded, but her attention kept drifting to the room where the doctor was working on Flynn. When she was finally allowed to see him, she found him sitting up on a narrow bed, his shoulder bandaged and his arm in a sling. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. "Like I got shot," Flynn said with a slight smile. "But the doctor says I will be fine. Bullet went clean through, did not hit anything vital." Clara sat down beside him, taking his good hand in both of hers. "You could have died," she said, her voice shaking. "You almost died because of me." "I would do it again," Flynn said seriously. He squeezed her hand. 100 times over I would do it again." Clara leaned forward and kissed him, gentle and careful of his injury. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes again, but they were different this time. Not tears of fear, but of overwhelming emotion. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I know it is too soon, I know it is crazy, but I love you, Flynn Easton." Flynn's face transformed, his smile genuine and full of wonder. "It is not too soon," he said. "And it is not crazy. I love you too, Clara Reeves. I think I have loved you since the moment I found you hiding in those rocks, so fierce and frightened and brave." They kissed again, and Clara felt like her heart might burst with happiness. After everything they had been through, after all the danger and fear, they had found something beautiful, something worth fighting for. Thomas cleared his throat from the doorway and they broke apart, both flushing slightly. He was trying to look stern, but Clara could see the amusement in his eyes. "So," Thomas said, "I take it you two have gotten close." "You could say that," Flynn said, not letting go of Clara's hand. Thomas studied Flynn for a long moment. "You seem like a good man," he said finally. "Clara's judgment has always been sound. But if you hurt her, deputy badge or not, I will hunt you down." "Are we clear, Crystal?" Flynn said, meeting Thomas's eyes steadily. "But you do not have to worry. I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure she is happy and safe." Clara's breath caught. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Flynn turned to her, and despite his injury, despite everything they had been through, he managed to slide off the bed and onto one knee. "Clara Reeves," he said, his green eyes locked on hers. "I do not have a ring, and this is probably the worst proposal in history, but I cannot wait. I do not want to spend another day without knowing you will be by my side. Will you marry me?" Clara was crying again, nodding frantically. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes." Flynn laughed and stood, pulling her into his arms, heedless of his injured shoulder. They held each other while Thomas shook his head, smiling. "I will give you two a minute," he said, backing out of the room. "But Clara, we need to finish your statement soon." "I know," Clara called after him, but she did not let go of Flynn. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, letting the reality of what had happened and what would happen sink in. They had survived. They had found each other. And now they had a future to build together. The trial of Marcus Tate and his men was swift and decisive. Clara's testimony, combined with Flynn's and the physical evidence, left no room for doubt. All 8 men were found guilty. Marcus Tate and 2 others were sentenced to hang for the murder of Harold Jenkins. The rest received lengthy prison sentences for their parts in the conspiracy and the attempted murder of Clara and Flynn. Clara watched from the gallery as the verdict was read, Flynn's hand warm and steady in hers. When it was over, when justice had finally been served, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was truly finished. She was safe. The wedding took place 2 months later in the spring of 1884, when the snow had melted and wildflowers covered the hills around Virginia City. It was a small ceremony, held in the same church where Clara and Flynn had first talked about their future. Thomas walked Clara down the aisle, tears in his eyes. Charlotte Montgomery from the Lazy J Ranch was there, having made the trip to stand as Flynn's witness. Jack Montgomery came too, giving Flynn a bear hug and telling him he had a job waiting whenever he was ready to come back. Clara wore a dress she had made herself, simple but beautiful, with delicate embroidery along the sleeves. Flynn wore his best clothes, his shoulder healed now though it still ached in cold weather. When he saw Clara coming down the aisle, his face lit up with such joy that several people in the small audience openly wept. They said their vows in clear, strong voices. Flynn promised to protect Clara, to honor her, to love her for all his days. Clara promised to stand by Flynn, to trust him, to build a life with him no matter what challenges they faced. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Flynn kissed Clara like she was the most precious thing in the world. The celebration afterward was joyful and rowdy, with music and dancing and far too much food. Thomas gave a toast that started serious and ended with him threatening Flynn one more time, making everyone laugh. Charlotte told embarrassing stories about Flynn's early days at the ranch, and through it all, Flynn and Clara could not stop looking at each other, could not stop smiling. As the sun set and the party wound down, Flynn and Clara slipped away to the small house Thomas had helped them purchase on the edge of town. It was modest but sturdy, with 2 rooms and a little plot of land for a garden. Clara had already been filling it with curtains and quilts she had made, turning it into a home. That night, in the privacy of their own bedroom, Flynn and Clara came together as husband and wife. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a celebration of survival and love and the future they would build together. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Clara's head on Flynn's chest, his hand stroking her dark hair. "I cannot believe this is real," Clara murmured. "Sometimes I think I am going to wake up and still be running through the snow, terrified and alone." "You will never be alone again," Flynn said firmly. "I promise you that, Clara. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Clara agreed, tilting her head up to kiss him. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Flynn took a job as a deputy with Thomas, his skills with a gun and his unshakable courage making him a natural fit. Clara set up a dressmaking business in their home, her reputation for fine work spreading quickly through Virginia City. Money was sometimes tight, but they were happy in a way that had nothing to do with wealth. They learned each other's habits and quirks. Clara discovered that Flynn sang to himself while he shaved, always the same old cowboy ballad his mother had taught him. Flynn learned that Clara talked in her sleep, carrying on entire conversations with people who were not there. They had their first fight about 3 months in, a silly argument over whether to get chickens, and made up with laughter and kisses. As summer faded into fall, Clara realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. She waited another month to be sure, then went to the doctor. When he confirmed what she suspected, she could barely contain her excitement. She spent all day planning how to tell Flynn, changing her mind a dozen times. In the end, she decided on simple and direct. When Flynn came home that evening, dusty and tired from a long day tracking a horse thief, Clara took his hands and placed them on her still flat stomach. "There is someone new I need to introduce you to," she said, her eyes shining. "Someone who is going to be joining us in about 6 months." Flynn stared at her, not understanding at first. Then his eyes went wide and his face transformed with wonder and joy. "Clara, are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am with child," Clara confirmed, laughing as tears streamed down her face. "We are going to have a baby, Flynn." Flynn let out a whoop of pure happiness and picked Clara up, spinning her around before carefully setting her back down. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice full of awe. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Flynn said. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her stomach, as if he could already hear the tiny life growing there. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I am your father, and I already love you more than you will ever know." Clara ran her fingers through Flynn's hair, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This man, this brave, wonderful man, was going to be the father of her child. She could not imagine anything more perfect. The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from terrible sickness in the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. Flynn was patient and attentive, bringing her water and crackers, rubbing her back, sitting with her through the worst of it. As she grew bigger, her back ached constantly, and her ankles swelled. But Flynn was always there, massaging her feet, helping her with tasks that had become difficult. Thomas was beside himself with excitement about becoming an uncle. He visited constantly, bringing gifts and offering advice that Clara usually ignored with a smile. Charlotte sent a beautiful cradle that Jack Montgomery had built, along with a letter saying the whole ranch was celebrating the news. Winter came again, and Clara found herself thinking about the previous winter, about running through the snow in terror. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. She was safe, she was loved, and she was about to bring a new life into the world. The baby came in early March of 1885, after a long and difficult labor that had Flynn pacing the floor like a caged animal. The midwife finally took pity on him and let him into the room. Flynn held Clara's hand through the final hours, whispering encouragement, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. When their son finally entered the world, red-faced and screaming, Flynn wept openly. The midwife cleaned the baby and placed him in Clara's arms. He was perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn green like his father's. "He is beautiful," Flynn said, his voice choked with emotion. "Clara, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" Clara asked, gazing down at their son. Flynn was quiet for a moment. "I want to name him after my father," he said. "Frederick, we can call him Freddie." "Frederick Easton," Clara said, testing the name. "I love it." Little Freddie became the center of their world. Flynn was a devoted father, changing nappies and walking the floor with a fussy baby without complaint. He sang the same songs his mother had sung to him, passing down that legacy of love. Clara watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Freddie grew from a baby into a toddler, then a rambunctious little boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. Flynn was promoted to chief deputy, working closely with Thomas to keep Virginia City safe. Clara's dressmaking business flourished, and they were able to add another room to their house. When Freddie was 4, Clara became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born in the autumn of 1889, a tiny thing with blonde hair that surprised them both until they remembered Flynn's mother had been blonde. They named her Grace, and she was a quiet, thoughtful child, the opposite of her boisterous brother in many ways. Freddie was instantly smitten with his baby sister, appointing himself her protector and playing with her endlessly. Flynn and Clara would sometimes sit on their porch in the evenings, watching their children play in the yard, and marvel at the life they had built. From such a terrifying beginning had come such joy. Clara would think about that day in the snow when Flynn had found her, when he had said he would handle all 8 men and she would reach for his hand. "You ever regret it?" she asked him once. "Taking on my troubles, putting yourself in danger for a stranger." Flynn looked at her like she was crazy. "Regret meeting you, regret falling in love with you, regret this life we have built." He shook his head firmly. "Never, not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara." "You saved my life," Clara said softly. "No," Flynn corrected gently. "We saved each other." When Freddie was 10 and Grace was 6, the family took a trip back to Hawthorne for the first time since Clara had fled. The town had changed, grown quieter and more prosperous. The scandal of the murder and the trial had cast a long shadow, but time had done its healing work. They visited the ranch where Flynn had worked, and Freddie was fascinated by the horses and cattle. Jack Montgomery, now much older, hugged Flynn and told him how proud he was. Charlotte, now married herself with 2 children, entertained Grace with stories and showed her the wildflowers that grew on the hills. Clara stood in the town square and looked around at the place where her nightmare had begun. It no longer had power over her. She had faced the worst and survived. More than survived, thrived. She had a husband who loved her, children who brought her joy, and a life rich with meaning. On their last night in Hawthorne, Flynn took Clara up into the hills to a spot overlooking the town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I wanted to bring you here," Flynn said. "This is near where I found you that day, hiding in the rocks." Clara looked around, recognizing some of the rock formations despite the passage of time. "Why did you want to come back here?" Flynn turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Because this is where my life really began," he said. "Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. But when I saw you, so scared but so determined to survive, something woke up inside me. I found my purpose. I found my home. I found everything that matters." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Flynn still had the power to move her with his words. "I love you," she said simply. "I have loved you since the beginning, and I will love you until the end. And beyond," Flynn said, pulling her close. "Always and beyond." They kissed as the sun set behind them. 2 people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of fear. Their love was a testament to courage, to choosing hope over despair, to standing up even when the odds seemed impossible. The years continued to pass. Freddie grew into a fine young man who decided to follow in his father's footsteps and became a lawman. Grace became a teacher, dedicating herself to educating the children of Virginia City. Flynn eventually retired from his deputy position, though he still consulted on difficult cases. Clara kept working as long as her eyes and hands allowed, creating beautiful things until the very end. They grew old together, Flynn and Clara, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, surrounded by family and love. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on the porch they had sat on for decades, holding hands and watching the sunset. Sometimes Clara would think back to that terrified girl running through the snow, sure she was going to die. She would think about the cowboy who had stepped between her and certain death, who had promised to handle all 8 men hunting her. And she would squeeze Flynn's hand, overwhelmed with gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought them together. Flynn passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Clara beside him as she had been for nearly 50 years. Clara followed him 6 months later, unable to bear being apart from the love of her life. They were buried side by side in the Virginia City Cemetery, their headstones simple but meaningful, but their story lived on. It was told and retold by their children and grandchildren, becoming part of family legend. The story of how Flynn Easton had found Clara Reeves hiding in the snow, hunted by 8 men. How he had stood between her and danger without hesitation. How he had said those famous words, "I will handle all 8." How love had bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances, growing into something that lasted a lifetime. It became a story about courage and love, about standing up for what is right even when it is hard, about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best things that ever happened to us. And it became a reminder that true love, real love, is worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, because in the end, it is the only thing that truly matters. The legacy of Flynn and Clara Easton lived on through their descendants, through the lives they touched, through the example they set. They had taken a moment of terror and transformed it into a lifetime of love. They had proven that even in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Wild West, even when darkness seemed certain to prevail, hope and love could triumph. And so their story ended not with fear and death, but with love and life, with family gathered around and memories cherished. It ended exactly as it should have, with 2 souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful together, and who had loved each other faithfully until the very end. It was a story of the Wild West, yes, but more than that, it was a love story for the ages.